Hell yeah.
So since I have a very brief understanding of your background, obviously if you're somebody that Jose looks up to and is pretty close with, you got to be a solid dude. So I think if you want to just kick it off, kind of start off with what made you push you to join in the military, and then kind of go through your experience that you had during that, and then where you're at now, and how you get through your day to day. So
Sure. That's like 20 something years ago, so that's a long time. So I enlisted 13 days, I think, or maybe a couple, like maybe 11 days. I don't know. I'm not good at math. I went to word school before 9/11. Um, yeah, I know the date was August 28th of 2001. So whatever the math is on that. My brother had joined the Navy before me. He's my younger brother. He's a Navy corpsman. And I was working um, at a church as like their janitor, and I just wanted to do something different. And so I signed up. Originally, I was. Everybody always says, "Oh, I was going to join me." Like I was. My first choice actually was the Marine Corps. I went into the Marine recruiter's office, and I was like, "Hey, I want to be a rifleman." I mean, I didn't know what the term was then, right? And the guy I went to was a box kicker. Uh, and he's like, well, there's other jobs outside of the infantry. I'm like, yeah, cool, but that's like not what everybody goes home and tells their spouse that they do. And if there's listeners that are not grunts, like, hey, pogues need love too. I was a pogue, like I get it, right? Like, but like I was a dumb civilian then, so I didn't know. And the recruiter at the front desk, the junior guy, he actually was a grunt, and I didn't talk to him. I talked to the supply staff sergeant, and my wife at the time did not like that infantry marine. He was loud, he was aggressive, he was cursing up and down, and she's like, I do not want you to be a part of that. And they didn't have any boat spaces. This was pre-war, so they were like, hey, we don't. Of course, this is me knowing what a boat space is. Like, we don't have any jobs in the infantry. I was like, well, what is it the Marine Corps does then? Like, for me, like an outsider, I just thought that's what Marines were. And he's like, oh, we have all kinds of jobs. I'm like, yeah, I don't really want to do any of those jobs. Let me go talk to the Navy. My brother's a Navy corpsman. Let me see what I can do to go work with the Marines, and I'll be right back. I went to the Navy recruiter, and well, actually, I went to the Air Force recruiter first, after the Marine Corps recruiter, because they were like right next door. And the Air Force recruiter was like, uh, "What can I do for you?" I'm like, "Oh yeah." So the Air Force recruiter didn't want me because they're like, "Well, if you went in on the Marine side, like you just don't want to do that. We're just you're not our speed." I was like, "All right, cool, thanks." Um, and then so I went to the Navy recruiter. They offered me like all the electronics jobs. I'm like, nah, man, I just want to go be with the Marines. Like my brother is a Navy corpsman. I want to fight. He's like, well, there's not really a war. There really isn't anything to fight, but like there's this job called RP, which is Religious Program Specialist. You go to SOI. They teach you all the basic Marine fighting skills, and then you just serve in a Marine battalion. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. I'll do that. And so I signed my contract. I went and did that. The Marine Corps called me back, and they're like, well, hey, are you still interested in joining? I'm like, no, I got a job with the Navy. Since you can't get me into the infantry, this will guarantee me probably a spot with the infantry. I mean, little did I know. And go from there. So 9/11 hits. My son is a corporal right now. He's a Lima 3-5. He's about to EAS later this year. My son was a year and change when I walked out of the shower to watch the plane hit the second tower. I didn't mean to rhyme like that, but it is what it is. And so I called my recruiter that day and was like, "Hey, can I get out of my contract?" The Navy was my second choice. I wanted to be a Marine first. I'm pretty sure they're gonna have plenty of infantry spaces. Um, can I go? And my recruiter laughed. He's like, "Nah, man." He's like, "If you're trying to get out of your contract to go to war, we're gonna hold on to you because all day long I've been getting dudes trying to get out." And he's like, "I've just been trying to get dudes get out of their contract because they don't go to war. Like, we're gonna hang on to you." So, um, they hang on to my contract. I go to Navy boot camp. I ship in October. Uh, I've never been as cold as I was in Great Lakes, Illinois. It was fucking freezing there. Never been to the Midwest. I got there October 23rd, and so it was like full fall was underway. You know, I'm born and raised in Southern California, so like we don't have fall the way like the Midwest and the Mid Atlantic has fall. And I was like, oh man, it's like super pretty. You know, in between getting my ass chewed as a recruit and trying to not look, but also like look at all the fall colors. And then one day, like we woke up and I don't know if it's pretty similar in the Marine Corps, but in the Navy boot camp, like they wake up with the plan of the day and they tell you what your uniform is. And they were like, the uniform of the day is, and they basically listed everything in our sea bag, like socks, big socks, underwear, long johns, t-shirt, long john shirt, utility shirt, sweater, towel. I was like, what the heck? And then like we were on snow watch because it was snowing. That was crazy. Um, so I graduated boot camp in December. Um, I went to my follow-on school, which is Meridian, Mississippi, which is where also the Marine Aviation Unit trains for their aviation like clerks or whatever. So we trained a little bit with Marines. Um, I remember being embarrassed because like we were doing like sun gods and like aerobics for PT, like sun gods, which aren't easy, but like we were doing like aerobics for PT with the Navy, and like these Marines would be like running in formation. You know, they're like young boot air wingers, so they're like motivated as fuck, and like, "Arr!" And we're like, man, that's so cool. Like, you know, you start regretting your life choices. And so right around halfway through our A school, it's time to select orders. And our instructor was like, hey, there's like 8 sets of orders or whatever they were. The First Marine Division out in California. You don't have to take these, but you know, we have to ask if you want them for volunteers. And I was like, yeah, me right here. I want this guy. And like my buddy Garrett went, my Aaron Fulmer went. Let's see, who else? Aaron Quaid, Adam Quaid took orders to Mardiv. Um, my buddy Mac Elliott, like a bunch of us all took like orders to the Marine side, and like the Navy folks, like you don't have to take those. We're like, yeah, okay, cool. So anyway, give me the orders. So I volunteered to go to First Marine Division. My buddy Rob Plaisted was one of those guys. He's dead. He died of brain cancer, probably from exposure. I mean, it could. Um, Eddie Garrett's still on active duty, and I think Aaron Fulmer's a youth pastor somewhere, like maybe back in Vegas. But anyway, so we all go out there, and before that, we go to FMSS down here at Camp Lejeune, and I was like, man, I never want to fucking come back to North Carolina again. So here I am in Wilmington, and now here I am in Wilmington,
Yeah,
North Carolina.
it's a
And
nice
so
day.
yeah, it's a beautiful day today,
Yeah.
man. I got a pint of Guinness. I got a smoke. Life's good. So like, and then I just went to school, like learned the Marine Corps stuff, learned to wear camis, and I never looked back. I think the last time I wore a Navy, like the Navy uniform, utility uniform after I got out, or after I was at FMSS, was like I wore it for like a day and a half when I got sent on limited duty when I got back from Iraq down to 32nd Street, and then like when I went to the Naval Academy. Um, and I ran the religious ministry programs there as an RP1. So I went, and I'm kind of an outlier. I mean, I was already susceptible to the coming to the dark side because I'd already decided that being on the green side was what I wanted to do. And so I just went all in. I went Marine Regs and had a blast. My first unit was First Combat Engineers. That's what I went to Iraq with. And then I went to 2-4. Worked at the School of Infantry, worked at Marine side, came back to First Marine Division, and then went to 2-4, and then went to headquarters because by then I was a first class, so I was at division headquarters. That was kind of cool. Went to the Naval Academy, and then I got out. In a nutshell.
Yeah. So, pardon me for kind of maybe not tracking on the timeline. So when exactly September 11th had you already joined? I know you said you were going to the recruiter before this,
Yeah.
and
So I went to MEPS. I was delayed entry, right? So I signed my contract August 28th, 2001.
So you
And
were
I
at
remember,
were you at boot camp when September 11th, or were
no,
you
I
a
was still a civilian. I didn't ship till
okay,
October 23rd. And I
gotcha.
remember that night clearly because like I got out of the bus, well, not the bus, the Gubby, and it was a van at the time. And my son, who was in my wife at the time's arms, he was a little toddler still, and she was like starting to cry. And I was like, "What are you crying about?" She's like, "Well, this is just a big decision." I'm like, "Nah, man, don't worry about it. Like, this is peacetime." That's why I didn't go in the Marine Corps. It's like, with my luck, of course, we'll get into a worldwide conflict or something. And I thought I was being funny. Like I laughed. I laughed at myself. And she was like, "That's not funny. You shouldn't say that." And I was like, "Yeah, it's fine. It's whatever." And then I woke up on 9/11. I woke up to go to work and saw the towers hit. And my son was sitting in his crib playing. And then that's when I tried to get out of my contract to go to Marine boot camp, and they're like, "Yeah, no." So I shipped October 23rd. So I was in boot camp from October to December of 2001. And it was really weird too because in boot camp, like they kept talking about the group that had come before me that was legitimately in boot camp the day that happened. Um, my wife was on Guam. My wife's an RP also. She was at Tumar Dave. She calls me a boot because she joined like 2 years before I did. She joined in like '99, I think, and so she was on Guam, I think. Yeah, I think she was on Guam. I don't really remember. For her, and then my brother was at the Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton already at the time. So
Yeah.
I joined actually before all three of those people. So that's the timeline. Yeah, and
Yeah,
then I
so
got.
no, so I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say is, I mean, so when you got to your with the combat engineers, you had already, I mean, had you gotten word, or did you have any idea of what was in front of you as far as deployment schedule or anything like that? You no clue.
No, no clue. So I got to the fleet in May of 2002. Um, and I remember checking in my blues with my ketchup stain, and I don't even. I mean, I must have probably rated a service medal too. Like maybe I had two ribbons. I don't know. And then just saying, "Hey, you've got orders to Fifth Marines, to First Combat Engineers. Good luck, man. Have a good time." And I didn't know anything about it except that I was going up to Fifth Marines, and that was headquarters there, and that was where. And so, like, I remember, um, just showing up in camis the very next day to Camp San Mateo and just being like, "Wow, all right, here we are." It was like death. Like it's so funny because like I'm trying to remember what I thought about it, like coming like as a boot, like wide eyed, not ever seeing anything like that camp before. But it's hard to because like I've already seen it and been it and lived it. Where like I accepted it's home, it's wonderful, and like I mean I've gone back like 6 or 7 times since I've been out just within the last few years. Um, I don't know, man. It was crazy. Like my office was in this shitty little shack. Like the F-15s are attacking Wilmington right now. Like we had a battalion CP, and it like this is the old days where like you had only a staff NCO ladder well, like only staff NCOs could go up the one on whatever side, and everybody else could only go up the other one. But like H&S Company, which is where I belong, where I checked into, I didn't even have like it was just this little ramshackle hut with like 3 offices, a hallway, and a battalion classroom. That's where the sappers were, who I ended up getting pretty close friends with a lot of those guys. They were super cool dudes. They all deployed with like the reconnaissance guys, they were super laid back. Um, Combat engineers was super cool because you had dudes that came from the wing, you had dudes that were like coming off the drill field rotations, and so like they were all still super motivated. And then you guys had the guys like I don't know how you. I mean, I kind of know how you guys do it on the East Coast, but like for us on the West Coast, like we legitimately had a platoon always assigned to an infantry regiment or a company assigned to an infantry regiment. So like our dudes were always chopped out to the grunts, like always. Like they were engineers, but like they were never home. They were always with some grunt company or platoon or whatever out in the dirt doing whatever. Um, and so they were just always chopped out, like always gone. So that's how that worked. Like I just and then checked in, and then like the very next day was like company PT, and away I went. We ran to the Hand of Hope up past Christian Eagles Gate and back. And it was like 3 miles, and I didn't fall out. I was actually one of the first few, I think, maybe that had made it back. And so the Marines were like, oh, all right, well this squid can keep up, so let's see
Mhm.
how this goes. And that's the way it went.
Yeah. So how long? So how long were you there? before you guys got realized, what your deployment was going to be, and you want to kind of go into that if you don't mind, or
I was there for about 6 or 7 months, I think. So I got there like early May, I think. I mean, I don't have my D214 in front of me. But like, so I got there mid-May, probably right around, I want to say the fall of that year, probably November, December, maybe even earlier than that. We started hearing rumblings. Like we just had like my buddy AJ Salim and my buddy Bear. They had just come back off that float that pushed into Afghanistan with then Brigadier General Mattis. And so those were like my seniors, those dudes that had rolled up into Afghanistan with like fuck all nothing, right? And so they were like, hey, this is coming down. You guys need to know how to get ready. Like back then, um, and so like we were always getting classes. I think that this is getting to your question, Tyler, is like we were always getting classes from these senior dudes, like how the Marine Corps had changed the way we were. Because back in those days, you had that zippy LBV that like was really shitty and like woodland green.
yeah,
I know it's
the
all like
deuce
archaic.
gear, yeah,
Yeah, right. And so like
yeah,
they were like, yeah, we don't do that shit anymore. Like you put all that shit on your flak, you put your magazines like this, you put your IFAC here, you put your canteen here. Um, and like this is the standard load. Everybody does it this way. Nobody uses their deuce gear anymore. It's all on the flak because if you get hit, like nobody has time to go fucking sort through that shit. And so like the training had gone from notional to like when I was in school, MOS school, to like this is what it would be like in a combat zone. The dudes that were seriously teaching like this is what you need to fucking know. This is how you apply a tourniquet. This is why you need to go to combat aidsman. This is how you have to be able to do this, and this is what's going to happen. This is how you move. Like then we started training. So yeah, I guess we actually probably knew summer because I remember being in the summer and we were, which was hilarious because it was H&S Company, right? And I get it, like we're not, H&S Company is not, they don't do this every day. So like they had us out there doing fire team rushes and squad size movements and platoon size elements, setting up near and far ambushes, L-shaped ambushes, triage. Like they had us out in the field all the time. It was fucking great. I loved it. I had a blast.
yeah. So you had a good bit of a workout before you actually deployed. You kind of
Yeah,
weren't just thrown into the shit without, you know.
no, like, and a lot of guys coming out now had like really bad experiences, and I feel bad for them because I had a really positive experience. Like, I had a lot of good senior leaders. I got to see the pre 9/11 Marine Corps and that kind of fellowship and those core skills, and then the post 9/11 Marine Corps. And so, like, I was in this really cool place at this time. And so, yeah, we did get the work up. The guys that had just come off that Afghanistan pump were like, no, that's like, we'd have the platoon leaders or whatever who would only studied on the books, and they'd be like, yeah, okay, sir, hey, that's really cool, but like, this is actually how we do this. This is
Right.
Of course, we had our NBC guy, Byron Yoshida, who ended up, he was a sergeant then when I knew him. He ended up retiring as like a chief warrant officer or something. I still talk to him every once in a while. He was like every other NBC guy. Every chance he could get, he'd pop a CS tube and throw it because we knew even then we were going to go into a dirty environment. So like we'd be on a company run and like CS gas or like, man, come on. Or we'd go out to the field and like hike into our objective and like gas. We had to drop everything we were doing and get into mop gear and put on our and move to contact or move to the objective in mop gear, gas masks and everything. So like we were already training to be in a dirty environment. So yeah, we had a little bit of a workup.
Oh yeah.
Man, that was cool.
Yeah, it sounds like you enjoyed it. I mean, just from the way you're talking and describing things, I mean, they stuck with you pretty good. So
I really did. Like I said, man, I had a really positive experience. Like that was like one of my first field ops was a CPX, right? So all the headquarters guys are lugging all their shit out there. The NBC guys are lobbing CS stuff at us, and we're sitting in the defense. And my buddy Stover, he was we were in buddy pairs in fighting holes, which we had to dig by the numbers. And like it was freezing cold. Like the worst thing about Camp Pendleton though was like all the training areas. And Jose, because you were there at SOI. Tyler, did you go to SOI West?
I was East Coast. I was
Okay.
Yeah.
So
He's a real Marine.
I feel bad for you East Coast guys. Yeah, because you guys are like out in the fucking nowhere. Like the 29 Palms guys, I don't know what it's like there, but like at Mateo, like you can see base housing. So like a lot of my NCOs were sitting there, like it had been like 85 degrees that night. And so like we had gotten in mop gear and pushed to our CP or our objective area and set up everything. So like we were soaked in sweat and it had dropped to like 38 degrees that night. So we're sitting there freezing to death and soaking wet socks because that mob gear like soaks you down, man. Like, it's not even cool. And like we could just watch all the lights like that. And I just remember like, man, this sucks. But like I also had my friends who were there in the company that I just made, and yeah, it was a good time. It was a really, I don't know, it sucked. Don't get me wrong. Like if you had to ask me right now to like go hike and get sweaty and then like sit in 38-degree weather all night, I'd be like, nah, I'm good, man.
No, and that's what's kind of funny too, because like at the time you're like, damn, this sucks. But with me too, is like those memories are some of my fondest, like just the shitty training ops, and you're just like, that's what it's really about, not just the deployment shit or anything. It's those funny, like fun times and that were hell at the time, but it's just,
Yeah.
those ones are the good ones to look back on, I think.
Yeah, and then we did a bunch of training too with like it wasn't even training, it was like dress rehearsal. It was like, hey, go out this was back in the days when you had to pack your mount out boxes and all your gear, and we'd lay it all out on the concrete and pack it all back up and then lay it all back out and pack it all back up and put it on a pallet and see how much it would weigh and how long it would get. And so we did this so many times when they're like, hey, get all your stuff to go. We were like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then they were like, no, really, like we're going this time. Go pack your shit, get your boxes, get everything light up, go do your will. Like I joined old, right? Like I was 25 when I joined. I had been married for a few years. I had a child. Um, but that's a sobering experience when your staff NCO who jokes with you all the time or chews your ass, depending on what kind of mood he's in, says, hey, you need to go over to fucking the regimental classroom and we're doing wills. And like they say, okay, like you need to list out all of your possessions and what happens if you get killed, what's going to happen to your kid, what are you giving to your, like, that's a sobering experience. And so it's really crazy to think about that. Like, and my son did the same thing. I'm pretty sure when he went on his cruise, like he did a MEU. Like it's sobering. It's really sobering. I mean, I probably knew I was going to be a writer at some point because I was making all these mental notes and I knew it meant something. I didn't know what it meant at the time. But I remember looking around at all my friends who were in the same pay grade as I was. First as RPSN and the Lances, and then when I made RP3, which is an NCO, and then all my corporal buddies, like we all just like the laughter changed from like hearty laughter to ha ha ha, that's so funny, to ha ha ha, oh shit. Like this is not as funny as it once was.
Yeah. So so how long, after they dropped that on you, was it before you guys actually left?
We left early because the combat engineers, right? So we left in January of 2003. In fact, I was just talking to my buddy Schaus. This was really funny. This is how the universe works, right? So my buddy William Schaus was a sergeant in the S4. He taught me how to shoot. And he now lives in Wilmington. He actually lives closer to Jose than he does to me. And it's just kind of crazy. Like, wait, I don't remember what your question was.
No, I was just saying, like, how, you got word that you were deploying, and then like,
oh yeah, that's right. So him and I were talking about it. He's like, well, we left in February, right? I'm like, no, man, we left in like mid-January because I can't remember if I missed my wedding anniversary or like I got it and I was thankful that I'd got it, and we left like the very next day or pretty close. Like and it's one of these things, and I wrote a piece about called Hearsay where I talk about it, where it's like they say like you're going, and you're like, yeah, okay. And like the first time they tell you you're going, right, they're like, you get your shit, and you're like, nah, this is just training. All right, everybody go back. Like this is back in the days like when we still had like phone trees, and what happened was like, and I remember this. We did some dry runs where an NCO was responsible for so many numbers, and a staff NCO like would just pass, like the bat phone would ring and the battalion CO would get the call, and then he would pass it down and it would come all the way down to us, and we had to be on the grinder. And then I remember we did this like for real like twice, and then finally they were like, all right, we're still in our window. Apparently they didn't have flights for us, so everybody go home. We're probably not going to leave for like 5 or 6 more days. So go home, hug your kids, take your wife out for dinner or whatever. And so I did, like, and I wrote that in that piece called Hearsay. And thinking about that, and then all of a sudden, like, I go to bed that night, like my sea bag's still packed, all my gear still sitting there. I got pictures of my son trying on my flak and my Kevlar and taking pictures, being in my sea bag. Not here they come again on a gun run. Yeah. And then going to bed that night. And I remember, like, even though we weren't supposed to leave for a couple of days, like, somehow I think I intuited that, like, this was it. And just not being able to eat, my food not tasting like anything. My wife and I at the time getting in a little bit of an argument, and then going to bed, and then getting a phone call like 0:30, like, hey, you need to be on the grinder like right now. We're fucking leaving tonight. And going to the armory, getting my rifle, getting my bullet, like, and even then it was like, all right, cool, fine, whatever. And then it was when they handed me my bullets, my rounds, and I'm like, oh shit, they really want me to put these pointy rounds into that dude over there. And then, like, you push those thoughts aside because, like, you're with your buddies and you don't want to look like weak and shit. And so, like, we're all just laughing and joking. And so, like, we loaded our magazines. And then, of course, they took our magazines. I don't know. It's really weird how they did that. We had, like, two dudes, the guardian angel principal. One of them was my buddy Bear. And then they put us on buses. One of the things I remember, too, is, like, so I got my bayonet, that rusty piece of shit. And I got a sidearm and a rifle and all my bullets for both. And my son at the time was like, cool, you got weapons, let me see. And, like, his eyes got all big and he got super excited and he rushed towards all of our weapons. And Shouse was happened to be, like, standing right next to me, and we were both like, no, like, stay away, this is not for you, this is for us, like, you know, like, don't worry about it. Little did I know, like, 20 years later he'd be going to the same area, sitting off the Iran, waiting to see some shit. And he was hoping to go to Syria, but, like, so yeah, dude. And then we just flew to Germany. Germany's really cold in January, like really cold, like really, really cold, and gray. It was ugly. And then we flew into Kuwait, and I don't know if the Marine Corps did it on purpose, but, like, it was dark when we flew in, and then they put us on buses. They were playing, like, Arabic house music on these buses. They had the shades drawn so you couldn't see out or in. At this point, we all had rounds, like, and then we went out to the middle of fuck all nowhere and just like, all right, here's Kuwait, Iraq's over there, hopefully. And General Mattis was like, all right, well, if negotiations break down, we're headed into the Fertile Crescent. If they don't, we'll all go home.
So at that point, I mean, you guys really didn't even have a timeline or know if you were gonna push or not. So
Yeah.
that's got to be kind of fucking weird, just sitting there, you know, not know, like, especially fucking Kuwait, because that place sucks bad.
Yeah,
but
and we
yeah,
didn't even get any of the cool stuff at Kuwait. Like, I remember, and it's so funny. Like, these are the things that I remember and that I really want to write about. Like, everybody's seen a movie; they all know what a gunshot fight looks like on paper, right, or on film. But, like, there's this one time we had to go get our gear from Doha, which is the army base there, and we had a staff sergeant in Motor T called Staff Sergeant Wood, and these army cats, and we always make fun of them, right? Because we're jealous because the Marines didn't get shit. Like, we were very much the make do with less guys. Like, here we are in the middle of nowhere, and like, we see these army cats, like, with ice cream. And I think Caressel was there and some other guys were there. And, like, we're looking at these dudes and, like, their camis are clean. Like, they've been showered. Like, we didn't have shit. Bro, we had, like, nothing. Like, we were living like savages out in the wilds. Like, no showers, no nothing at this point. Just our fly tents, and a burn perimeter that we had set up and established. I mean, what became LSA Matilda, we built. Like, I built that chapel there, the first iteration. Like, it's nuts, dude. Like, if you watch Generation Kill, like, and it's all focused on the reconnaissance Marines, right? Well, those dudes lived across the road and 2 tents down from me. Like, I used to watch those dudes, like, capture those big ass lizards and teach them how to smoke and fight scorpions. We heard about when that Corporal Person's, like, his coffee maker exploded. Like, we all got our asses chewed for that. When one of the H&S guys had a ND with a 40 mic in his fucking Bedouin tent, like, we all got our asses chewed for that. Like, that shit really happened. They didn't make that shit up. Like, that was real. Like, that was legitimately, like, I could look across and see the recon dudes. Like, I got to eat with I ate with the recon dudes, like, once or twice, because my buddy Ray Valdez, Mike Bear, Timmy Ash, Walter Lazo, and or not Walter Lazo, Walter Garcia, Lazo, and Randy Weiss, and then Gunny Dave Dill, like, they shot to the reconnaissance platoon, and they were, like, my close friends. It was probably more like a little pet, like, you know, like a little good luck charm. But I looked up to those guys, and they were like, "Hey, these are the recon guys. This is Mikey." And even then, they would call me by like my first name, which is like super weird. I remember Gunny Dill would make fun of me because I was like, "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant, no Gunnery Sergeant." He's like, "You can call me Gunny, like it's cool." RP3 of Marines, like he would get like super formal to make fun of me. Learn to play spades. But yeah, it was just day in, day out. Like, are we going? Or are we not going? Are we going? Or are we not going? And then like we were just in regular camis, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Hey, go break open your mop suits." And we were like, "What?" Like, go break open your mop suits. We were like, for what? Like, why? Like, they're like, "Hey," and then by that time, General Mattis had actually come to Matilda. I actually met General Mattis and talked to him for like 5 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. Out of the shower tent, out of the shower trailer, and I saw this little dude. And I'm like, "Man, this dude's old. Like, he must be a contractor or whatever." And then he turned around and looked at me. I'm like, "Oh shit, that's General Matt." Like, do I drop my towel and like let everything hang out and come to attention? And he's like, "Nah, young Marine, it's fine." I'm like, "Well, I'm in the Navy, General, sir. I'm an RP." Like, he's like, "How do you?" And so like we just talked for a little bit. That was a really cool thing, you know. And then there was like, "Yeah, we're going." And then it was like we staged the gear, we staged the trucks. I'll never forget, we police called before we left and struck all we left the tents up. Like in Generation Kill, like there's barbed wire and guard towers. There was none of that. Like it was legitimately just fucking between us and Iraq, it was just open desert. I don't know how far we were. I don't think we were like super. I don't think we were danger close to Iraq, but like Ripper, which is 7th Marines, and was Ripper 7th Marines? I don't remember. So 5th, 7th, and 1st Marines were all further out than we were, and they were closer to the border. And then I just remember my buddy Turbeville, who's Master Sergeant Turbeville now, as it were. He's up at Cherry Point doing some stuff. He was our driver, and we drove into Iraq. And I remember I was sick. I'd gotten a cold. Of all times to get a cold, it was like, here we are going to war. Like the ground is rumbling, and there's all this night flashing from all the J dams and all the stuff that the air's dropping. And yeah, I got sick. But yeah, like we didn't know. Like I had gotten hurt as a dumb boot when I was in Mississippi. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go with Marines, right? So I'm gonna go train." And so all of us dumb boots like started running the trails. Mississippi's surprisingly hilly, and where our A school is. And I remember cresting the top of a hill and taking a long stride because I was light back then and I was kind of fast, and coming up over the top of this hill, and there being no hill on the bottom. And so like falling down and seeing like all these rocks, I'm like, "Oh shit, here we go." So I like stopped it and pushed my hip out of socket, and it hurt like really bad. And but of course, when you're a boot, you don't go to medical because then you just stay there and they send you home. And I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to embarrass my family or myself, so I didn't say anything. And so I trained on it, and then went to Crest and trained on it. Trained on it when I got to the fleet, and so we're out in Kuwait milling about smartly, right? And I'm wearing all my gear and my mop suit, and I'm in like a decent amount of pain, and I'm still not saying anything because like all my friends are there. I'm not gonna go home and miss out on this opportunity, and I'm not gonna leave my friends alone. I'm not gonna leave my chaplain alone. And I just didn't want to not be able to face my kid and be like, "Hey, I bitched out. Like I took the easy way out when they offered it. I didn't want to do that." So I just gritted my teeth, and I went to our medical officer, and I was like, "Hey, do you have like some Motrin or some Naprosyn?" And he was an orthopedic surgeon, as it turned out. And he's like, "You're not doing so good. Like, let me take a look at you." And he starts looking at my hip joint and my knees. Like, "We need to medevac you." I'm like, "Nah, man, sir. I don't really want to go home. Like, is there like a steroid shot or something you can give me?" And I remember this because the corpsmen were making fun of me until they saw the shot that the doc gave me. The carport, I shit you not, was like this. And he gets in there, and like the corpsmen are still making fun of me. I have to drop my mop gear and my trousers. Actually, I was probably wearing silkies at the time because we realized wearing trousers and fucking mop gear trousers was not cool, even in the middle of winter. And he just, and you can hear him digging on bone and getting all that shit in there. And then he's like, "All right, cool. Now do the next one." And I'm not a hero, man. I'm not a badass, but like I didn't say anything, right? I didn't grunt. I didn't cry out in pain. I was just like, "Ugh." And the corpsmen were like, "Damn, dog, like that's gangster right there. Like you didn't even make a peep." I'm like, "Well, what was I supposed to do? Like cry or like scream or something?" And they're like, "Bro, like I'm sorry, I made fun of you, man. Like that's wow." So we did that a couple times where they did the stick me thing, and that sucked really bad. Which is how I ended up on limited duty when we got back. Is the doctor's like, he's like, all right, here's the deal. He's like, I won't medevac you, but when we get home, and if you don't get killed, you're going on limited duty. He's like, you need to heal up so we can actually use you long term. You're young, you don't think about those terms. Like, oh, okay, sir, fine, whatever. So there we were out in the desert, going to war, in open top Humvees with my armor was sandbags.
Yeah, that's something that fucks. Obviously we didn't experience any of that. By the time we were banging, we had some pretty decent protection, but just seeing that shit, like, I still almost don't believe it. Like, when I see it now, I'm just like, damn, they really fucking didn't. Like, we're not prepared. Like, the Marine Corps wouldn't be anyway, but
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that still, that I'm just like, that's just a different level of the experience, not even being able to rely on any type of protection, especially going into something like that. That's the jump off right there. That's
Yeah. And it's funny, but one of my friends is he's not, like, we're not friends, like, we don't hang out, but one of my Marines, his name was Brian Dowler. He was the first Marine over the border into Iraq. He was an engineer, and the track got stuck, and he had to get out and breach the obstacles and let us in. And so, like, that's how old I am. Like, all my friends are, like, in the Marine Corps Museum, like things that, like, stuff that, like, my kid got into a lot of trouble at boot camp and pretty much every day after, because, like, Marines in his generation just 4 years ago would be like, do you know who this is? He's like, yeah, that's so and so. Well, this happened, and he's like, actually, that's not how that happened, because my dad was there, or my wife now. I got divorced from my son's mother, and I remarried, and she's a Ramadi vet, so she was in Ramadi, I think, in 05 and 06, and it was still, like, really bad. Like, she got rocketed like 400 some odd times that year, and he'd be like, yeah, that's not how that happened. Actually, those guys don't look like that. That's not how they did that. And they're like, how the hell do you know, stupid ass recruit? And he's like, because my dad and all his friends were there. Like, that's how I know. And of course, you know what happens after that. He's an infantryman, so go figure.
right. Yeah, your account of history is a little bit different than mine, because my father's the guy that was there. So yeah, it's weird how time passes like that, and you can recall shit in detail like that, and it was fucking almost 20 years ago, or
Yeah,
I mean,
I was yeah, I'm like 18 this week. So next weekend, my son is getting married on Saturday as the 18th anniversary of the war, and, like, that, as a writer, like, that means something. I know it does. I just don't know what it is yet, but the fact that I'm saying, and I'm gonna say the words for him and do the ceremony, which is kind of cool, right? Like, 18 years ago, I'm like, are we gonna live? Are we gonna die? Am I gonna get gassed? Like, am I gonna do the funky chicken? Like, we had dudes, like, their 2-PAM chloride would go off, their auto injectors, and in their gas mask, or sometimes it would hit them in the thighs, and we'd have to, like, give them the antidote or whatever for it. Like, am I gonna die or what? Like
that's fucking crazy. They would end up sticking themselves with it when they
yeah,
get
because, like, the gas mask cases that we had were those like, I don't know, like, they weren't very good. And so, like, they would flop open, and it's not like we were like, hey, you guys have 2-PAM chloride and atropine to, like, protect yourselves. Don't train anymore. The Marines aren't gonna fucking, like, the engineers had built a whole little mountain town to teach all of the non-infantry types how to clear rooms. And so the engineers who had learned from the infantry how to clear rooms and had gone to the schools were like, this is how you stack up. This is how we move from room to room. This is how we go from building to building. We were training all day long, like, training to blow. Like, the engineers were training how to make we would call them IEDs now, right? But, like, just improvised mines and improvised explosives, to how to blow charges, and, like, blowing doors. And here's what happens if we get the call and one of the primary platoons can't blow an obstacle. You need to be able to how to set up a Bangalore and how to use the APOBs and all of this stuff. And it's like, we were training day in and day out. So, of course, like, we're running around doing the rah-rah thing, and these things would just go off for no reason. And you'd hear them too, and you'd be like, damn it. You have to go to...
That's nuts.
Yeah, dude, it was nuts. Like, and then, like, finally, like, some of us would talk afterwards, like, so, like, what happens if, like, we get gas? Like, no, we'll find out. Like, I remember, like, we got we probably got gassed a couple of different times. Like I remember getting hit with Scud missiles, like not close enough, obviously, because I'm still here, but within range where like you get knocked off your feet, and like we just get like somebody just shot a missile at us, like a missile, not like just a bullet, a missile.
That's interesting that you say that, man. War on the Rocks just released an article talking about how ill prepared the Marine Corps is within an MBC environment. We made all these changes to maneuver warfare doctrine, but the one thing that we haven't done is acknowledge the nuclear threat that's still very much alive. And, with like China's increase in nuclear warheads, their programs, it's becoming a very relevant issue. And, now we're talking about, the discrepancies in terms of like the invasion, but we're still fucking there, man. Like we don't have our shit squared away.
It's funny though too. It's like that's historically like that is on brand for America. There has not been one war I don't think we've been prepared for. Like World War II, we were still using World War I gear. Like we were just not ready in World War II. Like which is really weird because that's only a half truth. Because the Marine Corps in the 1930s, like upper echelons of command, had figured that the next war was going to be amphibious. So they had started teaching those Marines back then. That's why the Raider battalions came out, right? Also, Tyler, you don't know, but I'm a huge history nerd, so I read all this stuff, right? And so, like, we weren't ready for that. Like, the Marine Corps had started the amphibious warfare doctrine and figured that we were going to go to war in Japan, that was going to be one of the hot spots, and we'd have to go from island to island. And so they taught those Marines how to do that, but we're still using bolt action 1903s. Like, we didn't have any working gear, and the same was true for World War I. We're like, hey, so we're going to war, so we'll just figure it out on the way. Hominis Dominus, there you go.
Yeah, that's something we've kind of touched on, something like that before, just about how training, like how dated training is. And, you're running fucking ranges all through boot camp SOI that are, World War II based. I remember telling Herrera, one of the first big firefights I got in Afghanistan, I remember like being like, holy shit, this is like Fox 5, or like, which was a range on Lejeune, and it's just like a, open field, and your buddy rushing in, like, and I was like, holy fuck, like this actually is the training we got was applicable in that circumstance. And it wasn't all like that. Obviously, Iraq was a lot of urban, uh, combat, but yeah, they're behind on shit. I think the Marine Corps especially is just, but that's all.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like there's this weird, like from the outset of a conflict, I think that's we're learning as we go, and I think that's the strength of the American people, and it has been like we're pretty quick studies, and then like that first generation of warfighter comes back, like no, all of this is wrong. Here's what we do, and even if like headquarters Marine Corps and Department of the Navy don't accept it at the company, squad, and platoon level, they're like, this is what we learned. This is how you're gonna do it, and so there's that period of years where like training is actually really on point. But like my son was telling me some of the stuff that they're training, and I was asking him like, I remember asking him something about like 5-block warfare, 3-block warfare. He's like, I don't know what that means. I'm like, where like you could be giving out charms to kids and hum rats out of the back of a Humvee and like slapping hands and like, hey, America, we love America. And then like maybe they're a little angry, and then like you're taking rounds and giving rounds. He's like, yeah, we don't get taught that. Like that's not how we were instructed, which blows my mind because like we refined that, and then like there was that coin manual, right? Like that came out, and we were behind the curve, and then it worked, and then it was again out of vogue, and like it keeps going. I don't know. We're always catching training, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right now they're going back to the amphibious side of things. They're becoming the littoral elements, but that's one of the biggest beefs that I got, and kind of like why we're doing this kind of like investigation to make it more applicable to the Marine Corps. It's like, at what point does that lucky charm stop? It's only a matter of time. I mean, you have in mass populations that are either unfit or too slow to serve in a different capacity. And, that reality is going to set in if there is a bona fide near peer conflict, where you better believe that they're going to set up a draft. And I don't think, I just have a funny feeling that, maybe it's been across generations. I kind of felt the same way whenever like our seniors were leaving. They're like maybe questioning this generation. Do they got what it takes to continue the legacy? And then in '09 kicks off, with the surge. And despite all the discrepancies, I think we did a pretty decent job. And then especially in 2011, where we were just fucking shit up. And I kind of felt the same way leaving in 2012. It's like, I don't think that this, new generation has got what it takes to pursue. But I think that might be, multi-generational in terms of
Yeah.
just how that feeling passes on.
How does
I
your son feel about, the Marine Corps, like the brotherhood, which I know there hasn't been a lot of heavy conflict going on the past several years, but
he he has mixed feelings. I'm not gonna lie, he's a little angry. He said he's let it go, but like I think I did a disservice by letting him listen in on Jose and my talks and the talks of me and all my friends because like he expected something that he didn't get, and I didn't know what to expect, so I was like just grateful for whatever, right? But like he was going in thinking it was going to be the way we had all talked about it and all the reminiscences, and he's seen it a little bit, but he said it's changed.
yeah.
He said it's changed a lot, and that he was he like I said, he's getting married on Saturday, but his company's been tracking it since like last year. They said like the Marine Corps has improved enough that they actually send young Marines to like pre-marriage counseling, and it's like an actual retreat that like you will go to this, and like they give you
Oh
all of
wow.
the skills that they didn't give us. Like, hey, this is how you don't talk to your wife like a junior Marine, and you need to remember that like she's your wife and she's your partner, and like all of this stuff that I was like, man, that's actually wish I would have had all that. So they did do that right? But then like his chain of command is getting ready to go. They're getting ready in the middle of a workup. He's on the RBE, but not really. They didn't even cut him orders. He's just there. So he's not been removed out of his company. He's still a part of his company, but like he's just chilling. He's an NCO without gear and not a billet.
Yeah.
And they're like, "Hey, you're gonna go on this deployment." He's like, what? I put my leave sheet in like 3 weeks ago, and but my whole chain of command knows that I'm going to get married next weekend. They're like, yeah, that's cool. So you're gonna go on this deployment, and so like he goes up the chain like a good Marine's supposed to, and like nobody was like, oh well, that your name's on this roster, so you're going. He's like, how is my name on this roster? Like, how? Like, who do I talk to fix this? And they're like, well, you're not my problem. You're not really in my company, so like I can't help you. And he's like, wait, then how are you making me go on this deployment if you're not in my company? Like, I don't understand. So I mean, it all worked out. He's not going on this deployment, but just like stuff like that, which he thinks is strange, which really actually is pretty common.
Yeah.
Like actually, it's like he tells me all these stories. I'm like, well, okay, well, for better or worse, it actually really hasn't changed a whole
Right.
lot. Like so, but like, yeah, he was. I think he's a little sad that he didn't get the experience that I had. I remember when he got out of like for Family Day. Um, him and I were talking, and he's like, "Hey, dude, like, Dad, some of your Marines wrote to me, and like, I feel like I've got really big boots to fill, and like, I'm like, nah, 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 man. Like, you just do your job, keep your head down, learn everything you can. If you pick up rank, learn to take care of your Marines, and go from there. Like, you don't have to chase any of our ghosts. Don't look backwards for something. Like, you gotta do what you got." And like, I think he had some positive experiences. I mean, you have to ask him, but like him and his buddies, like a bunch of them went and spent like $100 and got like a whole goddamn house in Thailand with like swimming pool bathtubs, and so like he caught a lot of that stuff. Like he got a lot of that. But some of it was just, but it's not like the three of us, like some of our
No.
ties.
Yeah, and that's something weird too. I kind of, you see quite a bit of that on social media is like, this self-deprecating mentality of I didn't get my war, I didn't get to do this, and I hate seeing that shit. But I was telling Jose that I reached out to a mortarman that was in 2-8. He currently is in 2-8, the Fox company. I know no one in the company, it's fucking decades since I was there, and um he kind of was saying a lot of that same thing. I think that what your son, but he got to go on Muse, he got to go to Japan, do all this shit, and I'm like, dude, we didn't get that. Like I missed that, and that is something I feel like I missed out on. And I'm like, dude, appreciate that shit. Like enjoy that because you're getting to see a whole side that we didn't, really. So
Yeah, and it's like, And both sides are traditional Marine Corps roles. Like, and that's one of the things I told him when he was getting ready for his MEU. Like, he was like kind of down about, like, dude, like, this is the most Marine thing you could do aside from rushing an objective. This is why you were born. This is why you exist. Like, to go do a MEU, you're gonna go have some crazy libo. You're gonna do some good training with partner nation forces, and should shit go sideways, you're gonna be the one that gets the call. He's like, I hope it. I was like, I'm gonna tell you this now, and you're gonna not believe me. I'm like, I hope you don't get that call, but if you do, go do your job. And if you don't, you still did your job. There's a guy, his name, he's like kill.zone on Instagram. His name's, he's a major, he's a Marine major. I don't know if you guys know him. His name's Tom Schumann. He teaches English with the Naval Academy. And I follow him. I've been trying to pare back my Instagram presence a lot because like it's a lot of energy going out that I'm not getting back. But one of the things he said is like he says he hates, and he's a combat veteran. He was in Afghanistan twice with 3.5, or maybe once with 3.5. I don't remember. Anyway, but he put in some serious work, and he's like, I hate seeing young Marines tear themselves up over it because they're doing exactly what their nation asked of them, which is exactly what Jose did, which is exactly what you did, which is exactly what I did. That looks different for this group, but that's not any less than what. It's not any less, and like no. You're just as in. Like he was telling me, like they were just sitting off of Iran, and he was telling me like the actual number of drones that Iran launched at them. And he's like, yeah, what you saw in the news is not what actually happened. I'm like, yeah, tell me about it. Like, right? Like I don't know. Like he's like, do you know what it's like to just sit there and wait? And I'm like, actually, well, yeah, actually, I do.
That's what I'm the best at. Like that's it. I can do that better than anyone, man.
Right? Put that shit on my resume.
Yeah. Expert at hurry up and wait.
Yeah, subject matter expert.
But like it's crazy. Yeah, like I think you're right, Tyler. Like the younger Marines think that. Like I remember, so up at Mateo, we have what's called First Sergeant 2. It's the tallest point on camp, and we have all our memorial crosses up there. And I, one of my buddies, Justin Gachis, and Ray Valdez, and some of the other engineers, all of whose names escape me because I'm going senile in my old age. Matt was there, and like, so we go up there, and he grew up going up to those, like, he knows those names. Like, he knows, like, those guys were dudes that, like, saw him as a little kid, and they're dead now. And so, like, he would go up there and visit them and stuff. And I remember one of the years we went up there on Memorial Day, this infantryman from 2.5, his name was Danny. He was like, oh, man, you're like I see you're wearing a bracelet, and, you know, you're my hero. I'm like, hey, man, like, I just did my job. Like, I'm not a hero. I didn't go running with a dagger in my teeth, kicking in doors and machine gun John Bass alone, right? Like, I was an RP, man. Like, I'm not the pointy end of the spear. I just took care of my Marines so that they could go do what they needed to do. Like, I just did my job. Like, there's nothing cool about that. Well, I just feel like, you know, I'm not as good as you guys are. And I'm like, bro, you said I'll do it. Like, you said I'll go. Like, that's enough. Like, 98% of our population don't. Like, you're good, man. Like, I'm not going to look down on you. I mean, am I going to laugh at your foot mobile because you ain't got a car? Yeah, probably I'm going to. But, like, that's just good-natured fun, right? Brother to brother. Like, it doesn't make you less than. I don't know, man. Like, no, I also hate it when dudes do that.
Dude, yeah, for sure. And you're absolutely right. Like, just hearing you talk about, you know, I was an assaultman in infantry, which we did a lot of, well, they got rid of my job now, which is what combat engineers do that.
Fucking relic you are.
But it's funny that you talk about like doing breaching and fucking APOBs and like all this shit that combat engineers do, like assaultmen or infantry guys that they might not, like you were non-infantry, but you probably experienced more fucking infantry training and like good shit that guys don't even get to do. Grunts don't even get to do that shit. And that's just the way times change. But like you're saying, like we were just there, the task was put in front of us. We handled it. You guys just aren't being tasked with the similar situations we were. Doesn't mean you wouldn't do it if you had the opportunity, but it just sucks. And that's kind of like also like a thing where it's like, you know, kind of be careful what you wish for, because if you do get that, you don't know who comes back also.
Yeah.
You know, and that's just kind of like it's like a Pandora's box type thing, you know.
Yeah, it is, man. Like I was it's funny, but like, so now, I mean, X many years after the boom, right? Like here I am. I teach creative writing at a university here in town. Like I love my job. are the students who are really struggling with this COVID lockdown, and they're having some serious mental health issues. And one of my colleagues, her name's Melody Moise, she's a great colleague. She locked on what's called QPR. It's like, I don't remember what it's for, but it's our version of the suicide prevention brief, but for the university setting. And so I show up, and it's like a 2-hour brief, and I'd asked a couple of questions, and one of the persons said, like, well, what's been your experience? And I'm like, oh, well, I was like, my dead friend's number in the teens at this point. Like, I don't even count anymore. That's part of the reason why I try to stay off socials, because it's like, just when you think you're having a good day, it's like, oh, did you hear so-and-so checked out? It's like, come on. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. And it's like, I'm like Jose was teasing Mikey the other day. It's like, how are you going to your wedding without a car? And he's like, I'm going to walk on foot. He's like, and I'm not dragging around all this PTSD and some of the things that you've got. So, like, he's matured. Like, he gets it now. Right? Like, he's like, so you can go fuck yourself, Jose. Like, that's what he was basically saying. He's like, at least, but like, yeah, like those are those things that like you don't think about. Like I wrote, like I remember, this is so old. Like I was so poor, I couldn't even afford a digital camera. I had the little Kodak ones, and like I took pictures of all the cool war shit. Right? Like I took pictures of, all those cameras got destroyed in transit. And in an essay that I wrote, I'm like, the funny thing is like I'd seen that in the movies that like you take pictures and you collect dirt and you do all this namesake stuff. It's like, well, what they don't tell you is you actually don't need any of that shit, because it's here and that's not going away. I wrote a piece called 41, and it was a meditation on the number 41. So my Sergeant Major Ellis got killed like right before his 41st birthday, or maybe right around there, and I was 41 and one day, or I'll just shy of my 41st birthday. Pretty sure I was going to make it. I'm 44 now. And just like my son was 5 years old, and he died in 2007. And just thinking about like how time stopped for him, I can hear his voice with that big fat lip of dip, right? And just how that messes with the way you talk. And he was from Ashland, Ohio, but like I thought he was somewhere in the South because he had a weird like clear as day. If I could hear him like yelling at me like right now. Right, like those are the things that they don't tell you about. And so yeah, you're right. Like it is a Pandora's box. Like, and there are things that I wouldn't trade, but also it's like,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, just kind of say, and I feel like that it obviously has had happened before. After conflicts, guys that are serving their country and they don't get to experience the stuff, especially shortly after it ends. You're seeing a lot, and and a lot of what you didn't get to experience, and it's probably hard for guys that still want to serve and do that shit. They just wrong timing, I guess.
There's also another emphasis, and this probably be a good segue to tap into it too, with like the vet bro culture and just the image versus substance kind of a thing. But so Mike knows I always talk about virtue ethics, right? That's what the Marine Corps is built upon, is warrior ethos. And it seems somewhere along the line that got pushed underneath the rug between, our communities, whether it was the veteran community or whether it was the operational community, kind of commodifying or making consumer moves with all our team stuff. They took the sacred stuff and then just began to create a culture, something that we could laugh at, get around. But then somewhere in between there, it got kind of perverted or like corrupted, and I think that's been very detrimental to the mental health aspect of this supposed illusion of transition. Is like, all right, so what is this experience that was supposed to be the experience? And that idea of service comes with nothing but image and no substance. And part of it too is just no one wants to talk about it no more. No one wants to talk about the deep, boring philosophical conceptions of what that might mean. And that's kind of why I linger around, creative writing. That's kind of why I linger around still with those philosophical notions, is that, look, there are just some things with the physical aspects of war that you really cannot create. You can only find it in those philosophical notions. Did you take care of your guys? All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. You took care of, you did your part, right? Honor, courage, commitment. And I think that's something that a lot of senior guys, and this is kind of why it's been a challenge to approach people to come forward and say, "Hey, man, speak your truth. Maybe you can show some of us younger guys what we've forgotten." And I know me and Mike have had this conversation, this idea of hyper reality, right? There's nothing but simulations and copies that come with this idea of consumerism, right? Especially with the vet bro culture that has just pervaded social media, and it's kind of now leaked into law enforcement, where everything's just about being cut up, fit, this awesome high speed gear, but in reality, it means nothing, absolutely nothing. So, Mike,
Yeah, it's
just
like
go ahead.
well, I remember like when you auditioned for that one show that they filmed here. I don't know, Tyler. Well, Tyler, you remember because you were stationed. You're like Wilmington's like Hollywood East, supposedly, right? And they
Yeah,
were filming that, what was it, SEAL Team 6 or
yeah,
one of
six.
those shows, and they were like, "You don't look military enough, bro. You need to go home." And like I remember hearing that and laughing. It's like the outside world, and like my work deals a lot about that stuff. Like you'll catch lines like in the movies, this would happen, but really like this is what it's like, right? Like I'm a little, well, okay, I'm not as little as I used to be, but like when I enlisted, like I was 110 pounds. When I remember getting on the scale at Mark Air Force Base, and I was like 285 with my rifle, my rounds, my pack, my sea bag, and my little body. Well, that's a lot of weight. Like, that wasn't even mine. Like I'm a little guy, but I don't fit the military role because I was skinny. And like I remember seeing like all the guys that were jacked, like guys that had gone on float, like our Alpha Company guys. They were the jacked Marine, like the picture perfect postcard guy, right? The recruiting poster. Watching them shrivel up because they couldn't get their proteins, they couldn't get the nutrients that they needed, they couldn't get to the gym. We're just sitting out there in the middle of nowhere, waiting to see whether we were going to go get gas or go home or whatever. And like, see, like that's like nobody knows those things. They just think it's like you're saying. It's like it's the vision that we want, that we think our service members should be, but nobody wants to talk about what it's like to see. Like I remember there's a book called All Quiet on the Western Front, and it's a really good scene. Jose, you remember this because you read it for my class, right? And where these guys are like, their identity is caught up in them being German soldiers, and then they go to the river and they have to take off their clothes to get naked to get in the water, and then realizing that they're just scrawny little boys. They're not the soldier men that they thought they were. They were just little dudes who wanted like some bread and some water and to go home. Like that's it. And like nobody likes to talk about that. It's not, that's like the idea of being vulnerable and like, yeah, man, like when those missiles hit, like I was a little scared. Maybe not at that moment because I was a little too busy trying to like make sure all my parts were there. Make sure I got my gas mask on. Like when you guys started taking rounds, like you're not really focused on that at that moment, but afterwards you're like, that was kind of scary. Like I was talking to the buddy of mine who retired. He's like, you ever counted, like he was getting ready to retire. He's like, you ever counted on one hand, like how many times you should be dead? I'm like, nah, that's just because you're new to retirement. Like you stop doing that. Like you can't do that. Like that's not, that'll make you old. But those are the things that don't make it into that vet culture. And there's two sides of that too. There's the hero vet and the victim vet. And I think that both are a disservice because you get guys that, you get Carl Marlanti says it best, right? Like what happens is we come home and the civilian's like, oh, you must feel so bad for what you did, or I could never do that. And Carl Marlanti's like, that's not true. He's like, you could do that. If you went through the training that I went through, that my Marines went through, you could do that. You would do that. You might not feel bad. And I remember one of the lines like, it's good to kill your enemy. I don't have a problem with killing dudes that were trying to kill me. Sorry, I'm sorry if that offends your stateside sensibilities, but like don't put your morals on me for something you don't understand. Like, and I think that's part of where that comes from. Like we want this notion of the brave service member who's going to protect our liberties, but like not the skinny kid who has to write a will and like, gee, who am I going to give my Xbox to if I die? Even though that 19 or 18, 19-year-old kid, like being like, it's so weird, isn't it? Like you might think about that when you write your will, but also like you can't think about that. Not in the way that at 45 right now I get a chest pain. Oh my God, as I smoke a cigar, right? Like, oh my God, is this a heart attack? Am I going to live to see my kids wet? Like, death is a very real thing for me now in a way that in the middle of a foreign country where dudes wanted to kill me wasn't. Like even when I almost got shot in the head and I was like, holy shit, this dude's trying to kill me. What did I ever do to this guy? Never mind the fact that I had 300 rounds of my own to put into him. Like that never clicked for me, right? Those are the things that we don't grapple with because they're not black and white, which is why I'd also love the creative writing side of things. Right, we get to explore those messy confluences of morality and reality, and like what all of that means. Like, you got those dudes that are like, please don't do fireworks. Well, I love fireworks, but also like warn a brother when they're gonna happen. Like, I don't want to be napping on my couch at 2 p.m. on a Sunday, and all of a sudden somebody throws a firecracker outside of my window. Like, that's not cool to anybody, right? Whether I'm a war vet or not. Like, it just sucks.
Right. Dude, that honestly was, people talk about that shit now. And for me, when I was fresh out of the Marine Corps, it wasn't like nearby fireworks. Sometimes like cars backfire and that shit would like startle me. But the shit that fucked with me was hearing like my neighbor a mile down the street do it. Because I remember being like just in country, anytime you heard fuckers blow up tannerite around here like crazy. I kind of live out in the country, and that shit, like for a while, fucking, I'm just like, cause you would sit in your fucking fob, dude, and you knew adjacent platoons had patrols out. And anytime you're a fucking ID off, it was just like you're running into the COC to fucking hear if there's names being called. Like, and that's just how it was. And it bugged me for a while. Doesn't really anymore, but the shit, all like firefights, the way they sounded off in the distance and the way firecrackers and shit sounds like down the road a mile, that fucking they're just a weird, it's a weird thing. But yeah, I don't think that ever really leaves. It's just like one of those sensory things that snaps you right back there, and you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, for my wife and I, it's diesel fuel. Diesel, like, so I was just talking to Jose about this the other day. Where we get our trees here in town is a dirt lot. It's got that moon dust. You step in it, and you can hear poof, like you can hear the poof and see it come up. And so like it gets in your nose, and like like my body tenses up right when I do it. Well, right as we did that, like I stepped in one of those little piles of moon dust and felt the poof, and like my whole skin like dried up just as somebody revved their Cummins diesel engine, and I was like, oh. And I looked at my wife, and she looked at me, and like the guy with our Christmas tree's like, are you guys okay? I'm like, yeah, man, we're good. Like, it's fine. Like, I didn't like go curl in a hole or nothing, but like also like, ugh, like that quick.
It's weird. That's such a weird. Fine. Yeah.
Like I wrote a piece about that too, like called Throwback Thursday, where one of my TAs, like I supervised 6 TAs. It's funny. I got out of the service because I was tired of being leading folks and being responsible for folks, and now I supervise and mentor 6 TAs. So I'm pretty much still a platoon sergeant. It is what it is. And they were listening to Jimmy World's In the Middle. And that song, dude, like that, and I think you're talking about brovet culture and the hyper real and the reality versus what we think reality is like, those are the stories that don't get told. Like that actually did more for me in a positive and a negative way, taking me back, than a firecracker did. Like, because, my Marines are my friends, but like, they're still Marines. Like, they don't, like, for me, it wasn't, and part of it was like, I just thought Marines were cool for whatever reason. And, like, but realizing that they were people. Like, my buddy, what is his name? O'Neill. No, that's Mike. I have to call Skinny. Ryan McDaniel, right? Ryan McDaniel was a drummer, and he loved Jimmy Eat World. And I remember this because we were talking about Jimmy Eat World, because I bought the Jimmy Eat World CD. Like, I had 2 CDs, like Jimmy Eat World was one of them. And he was like, oh man, I love these guys. I'm a drummer back home. I was in a band. It's like, there's this moment where this sergeant of Marines who had one of his team leaders stop a vehicle. And by stopping the vehicle, his team leader thought, oh, well, the 40 Mike might through a window to stop the vehicle. And Ryan told me the story later. He's like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, you said stop the vehicle. He's like, yeah, stop the vehicle, not stop the vehicle. He's like, oh, well, sorry, man. But I mean, the vehicle was rushing a VCP. So like, what are you supposed to do? Right. Like, but like, so that's the Marine, and that's what everybody thinks about. But like, you don't realize that he's a dude from New York that loves Jimmy Eat World. Like, I like Jimmy Eat World. So these TAs are playing Jimmy Eat World, that song. And like, here I am, whatever year it was like 2017. I was in my 40s, in my office. I'd had a shower that day. My belly was full of food. I couldn't smell or taste diesel fuel because we were on ship. But the minute that song played, and I write about this, like, I can smell my buddy's feet. He was not allowed to take his feet off in berthing because it smelled so bad, because we floated home from Iraq. and like some of the Marines like doing rack ops because the squad leader Sergeant Bear said so. Like all of those moments, like in a fraction of a second, that block of time like inhabited my body while I was sitting in my office in the present time, and just like that stuff that the culture doesn't like. The t-shirts, and I love me a good t-shirt. I'm wearing a vet t-shirt now, right? Like I love a good t-shirt, like, but like the things that society expects of us, that's the thing they can't capture, and they don't know how. But I think they're perverting who we are, because it's like, oh, it's all about the war and it is all about the cool gear. It's like, nah, man, it's about remembering that like what's his face couldn't take his boots off. And that was the first time I realized that my buddy, who was a killer, who has a body count, was a dude just like me. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and there is something that's definitely unspoken about that, and it's a weird type of like forced toleration of other individuals that being in those circumstances, living in tight quarters, you just have to accept people for all their differences because you
Yep.
and the common person doesn't ever get that in life unless you go through some, a similar circumstance. But those are things that I think make service members better citizens and individuals
Yeah.
because you just have a higher level of understanding of different types of people. Um, but regardless of what you went through, when you go through those developmental periods with in tight quarters with people that are different than you, that stink, that fucking have bad hygiene or whatever, and you still got to be there for that guy. Like that's just that is something that you don't hear about unless you experienced it.
Yeah, and it's and when they do try to capture it, it's always so cliche. Like
Right.
it's always cliche, and it's like I write nonfiction, and somebody asked me, it's like, well, all the stuff you write, how come you didn't choose fiction? Most war writers go to poetry or fiction. I'm like, yeah, they do. Like, but like the stories I have to tell, the stories that matter to me, it's not about how I was like Mr. Billy Badass, because I wasn't. It's like it's about like all of my friends, like who I thought were the coolest dudes in the world. Like there's a picture of some Marines crossing the Diala River, and you see the guy like he's doing the classic pose, like follow me, right? I think that was Cantu Maldonado. Like that's my buddy Cantu, who was like, come on guys, and right after that, or maybe right before, Joey Biancamano, who was in the same platoon, like did a Medal of Honor run, and all he got was a damn, right? Damn fine job, son. I'll get back in formation. Like because the charge didn't go off like it was supposed to, and he had to run his ass to get it, to set it, and run all the way back. Didn't get a thing for it, right? Like, but in the movies, it would have been like this cool music, and like he would have run, and like it would have blown, and like he would have gotten awards, and like it would have been this big thing, and it was like, nah, bro, like, thanks for doing your job today. Maybe you won't have to do it tomorrow. And like that's the stuff that like, but in the movies, it would have been like he would have saluted, and there'd be tears, and it's like, come on.
Yeah.
I digress. Like I have lots of feelings about that.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
One of the things I want to talk about though is like, so I went out to Oregon a couple of years ago, and I ended up linking up with my buddy Timmy Ash, who was an engineer attached to I think he was the Alpha Company, I want to say. And if I'm wrong, Timmy, I'm sorry. I don't remember all these details, right? But like one of the things we were talking about, the same thing that you were just talking about right now, is like our culture has lost what it means to be servants. We want to be sexy. We want the multi-barrel NVGs. It's like I remember somebody posted, I'm like, wait, you guys had NVGs? Like if we did, like we like if we had one, it was like one, and it was like the one with like one barrel. You had like no depth perception. Like half the time the batteries didn't work out, and it's like my turn. It's like, and we had all the cool gear and the slings, and it's like I remember like cobbling my shit together with like I could not sew where the damn, and I still cannot. Like this trying to cobble it all together, but like that didn't matter because what mattered is like I don't know, man. Like if I got a box of cookies from home or some toilet paper, well then like we all got to wipe our ass with some nice toilet paper, or we all got cookies. Like it was about making sure, like you said, like we're taking care of our people, and that's the thing that got lost somewhere. And the sexiness of the war, like just taking care of your dudes is like, and your women, right? Like this is 2021, and women serve in the military just as much as we do. Like it is what it is. There's another funny story about that too. Like my wife one time, like in 2011 or 12, when women were allowed to serve in combat, is what like the headlines were. And so like I guess it was 2013 or 2014 because I was in the MFA program, and some of my MFA classmates were asking Lisa like, "Aren't you so proud and aren't you so happy that you can finally serve?" And she's like, first of all, we've already been there. Second of all, it fucking sucks. I got rocketed 400 plus times the year I was in combat. Cool, like great. So like you finally think that we're there. She's like, we've been there the entire time. Like I don't. Yeah. And they were like, wait, what? And she was like, just because you heard something doesn't mean it's true. Like my wife got super upset, and these people were just like, oh my god, like you're not for this, like this social moment. She's like, yeah, get your facts straight before you come to me. Like she's a little. No, she's not gonna put up anybody's bullshit. She was like, I don't know, I was there the whole time.
Yeah, for sure. And they were. I mean, you got to be a dummy not to know that. I think, or do absolutely no research, at all.
No, but yeah, it's like the idea of service is gone, but it's not a new thing. Like I read a lot for a lot of reasons, and not just creative writing. Like if you read, I think it's the Five Rings. Is it the Five Rings? One of the samurai texts, right? Where the ancient person's like, yeah, the samurais are wearing two swords these days because they think it's cool, but they have no reason why. They have no idea why they're wearing the short sword and the long sword. And it's like, so even then, way back then, like they were dealing with reality versus expectation, like fashion versus practicality. And so it's like, it's not something new specifically to our culture, but what is new, I think, is the access. Like, right, I'm going to bust on TikTok boots and whatever, like, and all the TikTok stuff. Like, there's such an access now to it that it's different in the way that it was, where like, you'd see the dude come in with all the cool gear, like, take that shit off. Like, that's heavy. Like, you're not gonna be able to move the contact in like all of that gear. Get rid of that stuff. Drop this. Like, you don't need that. You don't need this. You do need that, right? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, man. For us, it was more bullets, more water. I always chose more water. One shot, one kill. Fuck all that bullshit, man. I'm not taking more than
Dude, I've told Jose before. I was like, dude, I wish I didn't fucking carry 12 mags. I carry 12 fucking mags, dude. And I'm like, that, how much does a full mag weigh? I'm like, I needed fucking 6 probably. I needed half that, and that was extra 20 pounds I was carrying or whatever. And
yeah,
but yeah, that is weird. And not to go back, but anytime I do see fucking like even if it's a movie or like Generation Kill shit, a representation of something, when I see fuckers in that mop gear, even though we did like training in it maybe a couple times, we didn't fucking wear that shit on deployment. I don't even think we had it. But
we had to wear a gas mask on our sides.
Right. But we didn't actually have the fucking shit. I don't think.
They make really good snowboard suits though.
Dude, but what I was saying is, anytime I see, like, even though I didn't experience, I fucking probably know how hard that made everything wearing that shit. And, I'm just grateful. That makes me grateful. That honestly.
I felt bad. There's this one kid, and I won't name his name because I feel bad for him. Even though he was kind of a shithead. Maybe I was just a shithead too, probably. I was young. I was probably a shithead too, right? But this kid had to take a shit really bad, right? And it's like, there's no trap door. So we were outside in Nazaria. This is like, I think, the first time I got mortared. Because I remember seeing it at its arc and coming down. And just as the mortar hit, and me like, wow, that's really fucking cool. And the chaplain was like, you probably want to get down, man. I was like, oh, shit. And then like this LAV comes busting out of the brush and like just whacks these dudes that were trying to mortar us. It was super cool. Looking back, like at the time, I was like, well, that was stupid. Anyway, like, so right after that, like, this dude had to take a shit. Not because he had shit himself because he was scared, but like, it was like, we're eating, like, I don't know if we were already down to 1 MRE a day, but he's like, he goes to the bowl of one of the backhoes of the bulldozers to go do his stuff, and we were just gonna drop it off, and we come back and he's walking all funny. We're like, what happened, dude? He's like, he's like, well, so what happened is like, I didn't get the pants down in time, and so like he shat all over his mop gear. Well, we didn't have resupply, so he had to wear that shit for I don't know how long.
Oh no!
Like
that's like my first
so
patrol.
bad for that dude. Like, what are you gonna like?
So, I mean, excuse me for not maybe knowing. How fucking long did you guys have to wear that shit for?
I think like I don't know what the official account says, but it's felt for like goddamn ever.
Yeah.
Like at least a few weeks. I'm pretty sure it was at least a few weeks. Like it was just like it was insane, dude. Like on the one hand, it was cool because here's something they don't tell you: the desert's fucking cold. Like it gets really cold in Iraq in March even still. Like which is really weird because like during the day it could be like balls hot, but then like at night you're just like now I'm thankful that I had that training out now that I think about it because I was used to it, but like also it's surprisingly cold, and so like it was an extra warming layer, but also like it wasn't tactical. Like you move and like you were wearing 1970s pants, and you get to swish like the old Gore-Tex that I used to have. It's like they're gonna hear you coming from like 500 miles away. Like it was not. And then they started to just stink. Like it was so bad. Like we smelled so bad. Like I just remember feeling freedom when the word came down. Like, hey, you can get out of those mop seats. We're like, all right, cool.
Dude. Yeah. Anytime I see that shit, it makes me think of like when somebody's fucking trying to cut weight or something for a fight. And they put those fucking like wrestlers used to do it. They put those fucking sweatsuit. I'm like, that's what the inside of that fucker was probably like, just a fucking sauna in there.
It was because it was charcoal coated to protect us, and then it started to chafe if like because you didn't want to wear camis underneath it because then that would just be extra layers. So you were just probably wearing silkies and a t-shirt, maybe just silkies and maybe a polypro. Some dudes wore nothing at all, and so like that's just chafing the shit out of you the entire time because like you're sleeping in it, you're eating in it, you're fighting in it, like just all day long.
Yeah, grateful. Yeah. I didn't have it.
That's one of the things I always tell Michael. Like, at least I didn't have to wear fucking mop gear.
Dude, yeah.
And then if like you had to put your gas mask on top of that, like I don't know. Maybe now there's enough training that like you can prepare you for wearing all that shit and a gas mask and not getting the oxygen you need when you're moving. But like that sucks. Like it just. I remember going to headquarters battalion and getting pulled aside by one of the staff NCOs like, hey man, you're not supposed to wear your gas mask while you train. I'm like, what? I had gone out for a gas mask run and a flak run because I was dumb and motivated that way. And he was like, yeah, you don't have to wear that while you're training, man. Like that part's gone. Like you could like dispense with that. I was like, yeah. All right, cool. Like very well. I won't do that. I won't take and just like I don't know, man. Oh, the smell. I think it was the smell that did it.
Yeah. Going back, man, my first patrol in Afghanistan at night out of the 50 Northern OP shithole, is right after 4th of July, and we had the company freaking kebabs, and I got dysentery, man. And I shit you not, man. There I am, just squirting down my frocks. And those damn things were fucking useless too, man. They like ripped every time. Like we looked like a fucking raggedy.
We did. There was some reporter that came down. Like literally everyone in the company fucking. We didn't have like there's these things just shredded. We're all fucking knees blown out, like looking like bums out there.
Yeah.
Seriously, like elbows, shit. Everybody's all holed up, and they're like, this reporter I remember came down to Masood and was just like, "Do y'all not have, like?" I think she wrote an article about just how we look like shit. We're all fucking skinnier than hell because we're not, we're fucking doing at least 5 click patrols minimum, like a day, and no, you can't eat enough because you're just sweating everything out, and we just look like a bunch of vagrant bums and. Anyway, yeah, that's just those frog suits did kind of suck though. They did breathe nice though. I'm glad we didn't have regular camis, but
the regular camis don't hold up either. Like one of my other memories, one of my funny memories, is a dude named Nick Frizzell. He was a corporal at the time. He ended up making sergeant before he got out because we all came up through the ranks together. But so Nick Frizzell is sitting there on a camp stool, which And that's the other thing that doesn't translate is like little luxuries, like those piece of shit camp stools that you're like, I ain't sitting on that. I've got a couch, but like in country, you're just like, oh, camp stool. So he's sitting there with a camp stool, right? And like from knee to knee, like the whole crotch and his thighs are just completely blown out. He's sitting there sunning himself. He's got a pair of silkies on. And our company first sergeant walks up, is like, hey there, Corporal Fazell. Where's your sewing kit? Like, aren't you going to fix your camis? He's like, first sergeant, like, I don't have a sewing kit. It's in my sea bag back with all my shit that's inventoried. Because, they make you, well, you know that. Like, they made us inventory our, like, that was another new thing. Like, hey, inventory all your shit so if you don't get killed, if you get killed, we don't have to. And then put it in a Connex box. So, like, there you go. So he's like, well, my sewing kit's probably in my sea bag, or maybe it fell out. I don't know where my sewing kit is. He's like, well, you need a new set of camis there, Devil Dog. He's like, I'll get right on that first arm. Like, and so Nick's sitting there probably smoking a cigarette, like, yeah, right. Like, didn't even bother to stand up and come to modified parade rest, still sitting on his camp stool, falls out in the wind. It's just like, I'm sorry, I look raggedy. Like, maybe
I don't even have enough thread for this. Like, I don't have the fucking. Oh shit.
He's like, it'd be cool if you could get us some new camis for us, aren't? Like, that'd be cool. Will you come back a second?
Were those camis the chocolate chip ones?
No, I'm not that old. So it was crazy. So this was like right when the digis came out, but also the tricolor. So like half of us had digis and half of us had tricolor. Nick had tricolors. I want to remember that. I mean, I could go look at the photo of Nick, but I'm pretty sure he was in tricolors.
Yeah. But all the mop suits were woodland
green.
Yeah. In the desert, fucking tactical
gods.
Well, like, it wasn't so bad for us because we moved through the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, which surprised me. It was really green. Like, it was really green. Like, I'd never seen that color green. Like, in some parts, it was like we stood out. Like really, like, come on. Like, who thought this one through? Like, some dudes got like some of the interpreters got desert mop suits. Some of the reporters had desert mop suits, and some dudes had desert mop. Some like in relatively low numbers. But most of us were rocking the green tricolors. The only ones who had chocolate chips then were the super secret squirrel guys. The CIA operators, or not operators, but they were probably whoever those super secret squirrels were. They were the ones rocking tricolors, which you're trying to blend, but those dudes stood out.
Yeah, for sure.
What can you walk us through? Kind of like the ending of that deployment. Like, how did that feel?
Like, all right, I guess we're going home. Like, so it's really funny. So like, we're sitting there in Baghdad, and we're like, all right, well, I guess this is it. We're gonna go home now. We'll come back in a couple months and take over from the Army. 2-5, I think, stayed. I think one battalion. I don't know. I don't remember all the logistics. I know we left some units behind to like do security and stabilization operations, but most of us were like, all right, you're going home. They were like, cool. How? Like, we have no idea. And so, like, no shit. Like, how did we get there? Planes, trains, automobiles. Like, we got there because the Marine Corps needed us. The Marine Corps didn't need us to get home. So like, we flew over. We came home on ship. Actually, the Bonhomme Richard, which burned the hull, right? That was the ship I came home on. It was really cool because I was working in the library one day and I opened up a book, and the entire plan for the war, somebody from 1-4 had left in some book. And so I'm like, oh, I remember this objective, and then we're going to take this objective, and we have to take this objective. I wish I would have kept it, but I didn't. It would have been super cool. But like, so I had 1-4's whole entire battle plan for the entire, not even just like battle to battle, like the entire campaign, like when we were supposed to hit each town and what our objectives were and what regiments were supposed to do what. So clearly this was an officer who left this there. But that was super cool. But like, yeah, so the deployment ended and they were like, all right, well, we're done taking over a country and toppling a leader. The Army and these select Marine units, the special MAGTFs, are going to do their thing. The rest of us go home. And I had acquired like an AK-47 and an SKS and some other stuff. I had a little bit of I was a decent scrounger, and I had come up with some stuff like, you can't take any of that stuff home. I was like, well, but it's mine. Like, I found it. Like, no, you can't take trophies home. You gotta get rid of all that stuff. So I went and I threw it in some fucking canal. And then like the very next day, word changed, and they're like, "Hey, you can take some stuff home." And I was like,
Oh,
"All right, well, it's gone now, so it is what it is." So then we got in our trucks and drove all the way back, however many hours, into Kuwait, and then drove to the port and sat there. And I remember like that was like one of the very few real showers I got. Like other showers were like, I remember one time we took a shower like by poking holes in a bucket and warming water out of a jerry can, and one Marine would stand up by and pour the water, just a little bit of water to give you a little bit of a shower. You'd soap up and then he'd pour it on again. Like a couple of us would go through, and then but yeah, so like we got back to the army camp and like they had like beds and showers, and we were like, wow, this is like the Hilton. Like that was cool. And then like we just sat there, and then we got on LCAX and got on the ships and came home. And we got to stop in Australia for a couple of days. That was cool because the CEO had never been to Australia of the ship, and was like, "Hey, we're gonna go to Australia, Sydney and Brisbane." So we stopped in Sydney and Brisbane and Hawaii. So it was like, yeah, we went to Iraq, and then they were like, "All right, well, you're going home." So like, and I remember Sydney was cool because we didn't have any civilian clothes. We weren't on a MEU. We didn't know we were riding home on ships, so we had no civilian clothes. And like you can't wear utilities or camis out in public. They're like, all right, Marines, so this is what's, and sailors, this is what's going to happen. We're going to let you off the ship, and you have 6 hours to go buy civilian clothes and be in civilian clothes. If we catch you out of civilian clothes after whatever time it was, we're going to NJP your ass into oblivion. That was like the way it was. So then like we raided all of the civilian clothing stores in Sydney, Australia. We all got our hotels. Those of us that had Libo, there was a lot of booze that got drunk. I got so like we had some cool we got some decompression time. So like you hear these stories where it's like, oh, like on Monday I was in a gunfight, and on Thursday I was at Applebee's in Jacksonville or at a burrito stand in Carlsbad. Like I didn't have that experience. We got some time to transition. I mean, kinda, because we were all still around one another, so we're all still in that mindset. But we did have some time and distance between the last day in Iraq and our first day is back in Conus, which is kind of cool. It's a luxury.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I don't know. I don't mean, I have heard people, reference that was their experience, but I don't know. I don't think I know anyone personally that just got fucking dumped back into the fucking, besides you maybe, Herrera, you got kicked straight out to the Civ Div pretty quick after you got back. But I mean, as far as coming home went, there was a little bit of time there, where you weren't, outside the wire exposed to shit like that. But
It's so funny too. I remember my wife at the time was like, "Are you okay?" Like, this is again like hyper reality and reality. Like, are you okay? Like, we've heard stories about like guys digging foxholes. I'm like, wait, how did you hear stories? No one's come back yet. And she was like, what? I'm like, how did you hear stories of dudes digging fighting holes and sleeping in fighting holes and doing all that weird stuff? Like, we're one of the first waves back. Like, that's not. I mean, granted, it took us like forever and a day to get home. So like we left, and like it took us like 2 months to get home. I think maybe a month and a half. I don't know. So we slow rolled it all the way back, because you can steam all the way across like in 5 days if you had to get there. But we didn't have to get anywhere, so we took our time. So I guess some units got home, but she's like, yeah, there are horror stories about husbands choking their wives out and thinking this and that and the other and doing this and that. And I was like, that's bullshit. That's not gonna happen. Like that's all lame. So then, like one day I was taking a nap, and I was upstairs in my house on base, and just passed out. So I say all that stuff didn't happen, but then all of a sudden I remember I hearing a kid scream RPG, and jumping out of a dead sleep during my nap. I was on post-deployment leave, jumping out of a dead sleep, looking for my boots, couldn't find my boots, couldn't find my weapon, freaked out, run downstairs to see what's going on. And my wife and my son were out there, and he was jumping into his little kiddie pool, and she's like, what? I'm like, didn't you hear that? Did you hear that? hear that Marine say RPG, like, she's like, dude, it's the kids next door. They're just playing war. Like, what do you want? I was like, I'm just kidding. Like, it's cool. I was just messing with you. And I was like, oh my God. Like, so, I did have that time, but then also like out of a dead sleep, I was like, oh my God, like, I feel like an idiot. I'm gonna go back upstairs and go to bed now. Of course, could I go back to sleep? No. I don't know. It is what it is.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm interested in your creative writing, as far as like what were you always writing? Did you write on deployment, or is that something that you got into after
So I kept a
service?
journal, and I didn't think I was gonna be I didn't think like I'm gonna be a writer. I'm gonna write all this war stuff, right? So what really happened is, so they made me leave First Marine Division. The Navy in fact does want their pound of flesh, and they're like, hey, it actually says U.S. Navy on your name tape, so you actually got to go do Navy things. And so I was a first class, which is an E6, is an RP1, and like, you need to go take orders out of the Marine Corps. I was like, well, why? All my friends are here. Like, this is home. I don't want to leave. And they're like, yeah, cool story, bro. Anyways, so you belong to us, so pick some orders. So I took orders to the Naval Academy, and I did not do so well away from the Marines. It's like I had my whole support network pulled out from underneath me, and like I was just tired of it. And I was like, you know what? I want to go back to the fight. I thought I was gonna become an officer and go to Afghanistan, because I was like, well, I already know what Iraq looks like. I want to go to Afghanistan. I'll become an officer, and then that's the surest way to go. So I left the Navy, and went to school, and I had to take an elective, and the creative writing class was my elective. It was the first class I took. At least that's how I remember it. Memory is tricky, but like, I remember I got out on a Monday. I went to school on like a Wednesday or a Thursday, which I don't recommend doing. Like, transitioning from the military to school in 2 days, probably not my best move. I would counsel younger service members to not do that. Maybe take some time off, decompress. Um, anyway, so I took this creative writing class, and I wrote, and it was weird. I remember the kids not wearing pajamas. Like, the kids would wear pajamas to school, and I'd be like, dude, like, go take a shower, get dressed. Like, showers are wonderful. Like, why would you, like? How do you not give yourself? I mean, now, like, now I understand a little bit, and try to have a little bit of grace. But I was one of those vets, man, that got out and was like angry at everybody and everything. And so I took this creative writing class, and I turned in some pieces, and the instructor of the class was like, hey, what are you gonna do with your college career? I'm like, oh man, like, I'm actually a foreign languages and history major. I want to go in and go back and be an officer. I just took this class because, like, I thought it'd be cool. She's like, well, you actually kind of have a talent for this. You should major in this and maybe consider being a writer. I was like, no, yeah, right, no way. She's like, well, okay, like, just maybe take one more creative writing class. And I was like, I don't even know how that works. And she's like, okay, so you can take fiction, you can take poetry, or you can take nonfiction, and you can decide. And so I went home and I talked to my wife about it. And right around this time, like, I was really homesick, and I wanted to go back, and I tried to go back into the reserve. I was within my year window of BASing, and they're like, yeah, man, we don't need you. Like, you're old, and thanks for your service, but like, go do something else. And I was like, okay, well, I'll go to the reserves then. And the reserves like, hey man, like, that's cool that you served your country and all, but like, we don't really need you. Like, the war's winding down, and you're gonna be all right. This is 2011. So then I also put in my I reached out to the Marine OSO, right, the officer selection officer, and I was like, hey, I'm a prior service enlisted guy. I'm looking at coming back in. He's like, hey man, like, the war's over and we don't need you. Thanks for all that you did, and have a good life. And I was like, well, now what do I do? Well, about that time, I had taken a second creative writing class, and I had chose nonfiction because if I was going to tell stories, I wanted to tell the stories of the dudes I knew, like Joey Biancamano and all those dudes that, like, just, like, I didn't do anything cool. Like, I did my job. They're the dudes that, like, they put in work, right? Like, I wanted people to know that they were real people, like the things that they did. And so, like, I was just like, all right, fine. So I wrote a piece called Sleep or Boxes. Boxes is the first piece, and it got published in this class. And so it got published at the same time the Navy and the Marine Corps were like, go the fuck home. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll do this writing thing. And so, like, people liked it pretty well. But I didn't want to be one of those writers that just wrote about the war because, like, that's what vets do. I wanted to do something artful, and I'd read plenty of war stories. Like, well, I'm just going to try to do something different. And so then I just stayed in it. And then when I graduated with my undergraduate degree in creative writing, so it was like, you should probably try to think about going to graduate school. So I did. And I got into graduate school. That's kind of a long story too, like getting to graduate school. But then I got to graduate school, and they let me be a creative writing TA. So I taught creative writing for 3 years. I'd gotten my certificate in publishing, so like I knew how to do design and how the publishing industry worked. And so I went to a men's magazine and was working for them kind of part time for free, just because I needed to keep my skills sharp. And then so I graduated with my MFA in creative writing, and so like we all tell war stories. We're storytellers, and some of us are better at it than others. But like, and so I've just made it my purpose to tell the stories of the dudes that aren't going to tell their stories. Not that I'm stealing their stories, but like, I'll use Joey because he comes to mind. Like Joey's a cop. I think he's still a cop somewhere in Philadelphia, maybe, or in Pennsylvania. Like he's not going to tell anybody outside of us. Like, oh, you remember that time when we did this, or you remember that time we did that. But like, I don't know. I just feel like our civilian citizenry is so disconnected from what we do. I thought maybe like I could write those stories and people would see what it was really like for me. Like I'm not going to be the guy that says I'm not going to write the book that's like the defining global war on terror book. I don't like you can always tell those dudes that are trying to write that book. I don't want to be that guy. I'm not that guy. But the other thing too is like I started writing because then like I said, it was hard for me. Like I got out, I struggled a lot, and I started writing those stories down because like and it goes back to this idea of service, right? Like I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. It's like I'm one of the lost boys. Like I'm no matter how old I am right now and where I am in my career, I'm still that 25-year-old dude sitting in the middle of Iraq in MOPS gear, doing his thing, watching his Marines do their thing. And so like if I can write about my struggles and where I was at, and if dudes would be like, oh, like I'm not alone, well, I'm good with that. So that's how I got into creative writing and why I stuck with it. Like writing's important. I think that, and I think there's some academic stuff too behind it. Like right, like war fighters have always been storytellers, going all the way back to ancient civilizations. Well, we would go on the hunt, or we would go to war with the people across the valley, so that we could take their supplies and survive another winter, or defend from people trying to take our supplies so that we could survive another winter. And if we went on a campaign, well, what would we do? Well, we'd come sit around the campfire and we'd tell the stories. And what would happen is the people who stayed home because they were probably too old to go out back to war, and the folks that got to eat the animal that we killed or take some of those supplies that we conquered and stole and brought back, like they weren't there, but we would tell our stories to them, and they'd be like, hey man, thanks for what you did. And there would be healing, and there would be that unity between the defended and the defenders, or the warriors and those who stayed home. And so that's, I think, why I continue to write, and why I'm an advocate for veteran writers. Like that's how those bridges get crossed. Like there is a huge divide, but I think the more of us that are out there, like, hey, like, yeah, like every once in a while I'll start out of a dead sleep, or I'll have a bad dream, but like that's not what defines me. The more stories we get out, the more the citizen population is like, oh, like, wait, you're like a person just like me. Like that's cool, right? Like, and I think that's how we'll actually get a lot better that way. It's difficult. Like there's times where people are like, hey, have you been working on this? It's like I don't really want to write that stuff anymore because like it costs me. Like I'm sitting in my backyard. It's sunny. There's birds chirping. The fast movers have stopped doing whatever it is they're doing. I'm having a Guinness. I'm sitting on a podcast. Life is good. I don't always want to go back and dig up old shit. It's like, but sometimes I think you have to for other people, because that's what I did. Like if I could tell a story and somebody's like, hey man, I know what it's like I wrote that piece called Hearsay that came out a couple months ago that the people at Pause Press published for me. It was really cool. Probably like one of my guys from 2-4 killed himself. He rented a car and drove up to Yellowstone, I think the story is, and they found his body months later. And so I started thinking about like, well, I struggled with that. Like right in 2011, I'd gotten out of school. I couldn't find a job. I was like, bill collectors were coming for me. I didn't know I was getting into graduate school. And the day I found out I was getting into graduate school, I was going to kill myself. Like I had my 45 in my mouth, and I was like, man, CLP tastes like shit. And I took the gun out of my mouth for a second, and the phone rang, and it was like my school being like, hey, we really dig your writing and think you should come to study with us. And I was like, oh my God, like I almost ended my life. Like, but now I have something to live for. And like, I tell that story, and not because I want people to be like, oh, you poor broken soldier, look at what we did to you. And I don't want people to be like, oh man, you're a gangster, dude. Like, that's so cool. Like, I don't know, like maybe somebody will read that and not kill themselves today. And they won't have to read about it on Facebook about like you both of us, we all know what it is. We all know what it's like. It's like when you have to rip that Band-Aid off, like you're doing good, and you find out one of your buddies is dead, and it's like, well, let's kick me back like 6 steps. I don't know. That's a really long answer for that question. Sorry, I don't mean to ramble.
No, and I just want to jump in here because it's kind of weird. I didn't realize you were the same guy until like 30 minutes ago that I have been following. And I don't know if it's from OAF Nation or
Yeah.
whatnot, your writings, maybe from them. I know I followed you for a while, but your hearsay piece, I had to go find you on Instagram and make sure you were the same guy that wrote that because the way that you put things into words is like, I think for somebody, especially like me, that, we talk about remembering these fine details about situations and stuff. It's just, it hits home a little bit differently. And like you say, even reading some of that stuff is difficult, but I think it's what some people do need. They need to relive. Maybe they can't think of memories in that way, and you help
Yeah.
do that for some people. But it's pretty cool, and I do appreciate that. I'm not somebody like I've told uh, Herrera before. Like I'm not the most articulate, but I definitely appreciate somebody that can depict a memory, even that maybe I haven't lived, but I can put myself there just based off of what they're saying. So
Yeah, man. I appreciate that. And like the thing is like I don't know, are you married or you have
yeah,
like
yep,
like right? Like maybe one day like somebody in your family is like, well, what was it like? And you can't put it into words. But it would be humbling to me, like, and I'm not doing it for the likes, right? But like if you're like, oh dude, you should totally read this piece. And it's not just my piece. There's tons of good writers out there.
sure,
Right? I mean, Jose's got his book too. And it's like you can't I don't know how to put this into words, but like if you go read my buddy's piece right there or this piece right there, like that will help you get there. And like that will help all of us. Like that's why I do what I do and why I'm
yeah.
stuck with it because it's yeah. So
No,
I
it is
appreciate that,
hard.
man.
No, it is hard, and it's hard to, like you say, especially if it's some you don't know how you're gonna come across to somebody when you try and just tell them. So that is a good way. It's a way to tell someone something without telling them something. Like all the memes
Yeah,
you're seeing now. Tell me you're a Marine without telling me you're a Marine, and then it's a bunch of gay dudes dancing in underwear. And that's that's just what's on Instagram anymore. But
yeah,
it's funny. So, but yeah, that's no, that's awesome, man. And I do think just like this, and her reaching out to me to talk about stuff on here kind of started this whole thing where and I think there's different avenues that people can utilize or even just get to enjoy that help them out.
yeah,
It's not somebody's got to keep telling the stories and keep talking about it because when you don't, we obviously know what happens. You
yeah,
know, bodies get left in the dark and then they think nobody's there going through it with them still, and that's just not true.
yeah. No, I think you're dead on. I couldn't say it better, Tyler.
Yeah. So what are you doing now? You're a professor at UNCW or
So I'm a lecturer at UNCW. Yeah, I'm also the assistant director of the Pub Lab. So like I help mentor 6 TAs who like mentoring is a loose word. Like these guys are great. Like they since I've been there, we've had like 2.5 hurricanes, a pandemic, a winter storm, and like like we just do art stuff for like our literary magazine and for our literary publisher. I make sure like people still come to work and the deadlines get hit. These guys do like well, they just do a ton of work, and I get the pleasure of just going to work and like seeing the stuff that they create. Like we'll get like we do Instagram posters. You can follow us UNCW Pub Lab, I think is what our Instagram is, and like the Department of Creative Writing and just we design cool stuff, and I get to supervise them and make sure like and teach them some of the things I've learned along the way. But they do all of the work. I'm just the one that's like, hey, did you remember to do this? And could you send me this email? I don't do like they do all the work. I just like deliver the work that they do, and it's super cool. I get to teach publishing every once in a while. I get to teach creative writing, I teach creative writing on the side. Like I've got a class that I designed for the university for me, but for the university let me teach called Reading and Writing the War. And so instead of it being therapy, it's like we look at other writers from other areas and how they've approached writing war, and then how we can, as modern veterans, and even I've had some older folks take it too. Like, how can you tell your story in an artful way? And like that's super cool. And I taught it during the summer, and so like I've got a group of vets that like I kind of talk to every once in a while, and we laugh and joke, and it's just a way for me to keep community in a cool way, keep me connected, as it were.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Like if you would have told me 18 years ago that I was going to be the assistant director of the pub lab and a lecturer in creative writing at UNCW, dude, as I'm sitting there, like after just getting jabbed in the hip and like wearing my gas mask and my mop gear, trying to like snuff down some MRE pound cake, I'd be like, yeah, right, get the hell out of here. I'm no way. Like, let's just make it through the day, right? Like,
So whatever happened with your hip? You said you went on light duty, and then did you?
that really messed. That was really bad, dude. Like, so I ended up coming back home, and they were like, "All right, so limited duty it is." I'm like, "No, no, I'm good. Look, I can do it." And they're like, "Yeah, no." So like, they. This is what we do wrong. Is they took my uniform from me. Like it's weird to say that, and maybe it's unhealthy, but like when they made me take my camis off and put the Navy utilities back on and go down to 32nd Street, like that messed with my head. And it's like when I had to leave my battalion, any unit that I left, like it was progressively getting me further away from what I mattered. Well, anyway, so like I got put on limited duty, and so then I got sent to base. Like they sent me down to Navy Station 32nd Street, and I was a young third class, and I'd been raised by a bunch of Marine NCOs in the early 2000s, which meant I was a holy terror. Like I remember the first class is like, all right, guys, so we're gonna go clean this and we're gonna go clean that, and I was like, why don't you just give me this list, and you in the first class and other first classes and second classes go do whatever it is you do, and I'm a third class, and me and these seamen and other third classes, like we'll take care of this. And they were like, what? I'm like, dude, you're an E5 and an E6. Like, you don't need to be up in the broom. Like, it was a total culture shock. I was totally messed up. They're like, hey, you need to go back to Camp Pendleton. You don't belong here. So, like, they sent me to base. I went to work at School of Infantry West. Um, did that for a little bit. And then I got tired of all of my friends dying in Ramadi and Fallujah. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Like, that's when that happened. And I had to sit home and watch that. And that sucked. Like I would come home to my wife every night and hug my son and play with my son, and she'd be like, "Aren't you glad you're home and safe with us?" And I'm like, "Yeah," but really, I wasn't. My heart was over there. Um, like a kid that used to live across the street from me when I was a civilian, but we didn't know until after. Like I met this kid, Whiskowich. And there's a piece on my faculty page called "A Long and Incomplete List of All the Things You Don't Talk About." So like this kid, like I went to go to the barracks, and like I had a house, and these single Marines were sitting in the barracks. So me and my buddy Stover and his wife and my wife, we cooked like turkeys and pies, and just went and like, all right, you guys are coming with us. And I ran into this kid Whiskowich, and he's like, oh, I'm going home. I'm like, oh, he's like home, like right here. He's like, no, I live in Victorville. I'm like, get out of here. That's like right next to the town that I'm like, I used to live in Victorville. He's like, oh, where'd you live? I'm like, oh, I lived on Seneca Road. He's like, I did too. Do you remember those I'm like, oh, yeah, I used to live in the Summer Breeze apartment. He's like, dude, I live right across the street from there. Didn't know that kid. Well, he got killed the next year. Um, and so I was on limited duty, and I should have been on that deployment or on a deployment like that. And so, like, watching those dudes that I went to the Marine Corps ball with and had all kinds of crazy stories and went to Libo with, and then them like reading the casualty reports as they came in, like that sucked. I mean, it wasn't as bad as getting shot at every day or getting blown up every day. Not even in the same ballpark. But like that, that's what happened to me. I had to sit there on the sideline to watch it. And I kind of really never forgave myself for that. Like it just sucked because all my friends were putting. And it's not even because I wanted to be a hero. It's like, well, all my friends are going back to work. Why can't I go back to work? Here I am, just sitting, putting out punch and cookies for people at the chapel and doing all the thing when my buddies are doing their thing, and I'm sitting here going to funerals. That was not cool. But you know,
Yeah, there's something weird about that too. I mean, I don't.
That's how I felt when I got on 2011 and things started popping off in 2012, 2013, and just having the dudes like separate from 2-8 just to go to these like smaller conflicts. like going to Yemen and shit like that. Dude, I had to turn off the news, man, because it was just getting to the point. Like 2013, I tried to get back into the reserves, and I was close. The only thing that stopped was I had a tattoo, and it was
Yeah.
it was like it wasn't within regs, and I was just like, you got to be kidding me! I got 3 tours, like I'm running 20 miles a day, like I'd be an asset to you, whatever. And just got to the point where I just couldn't, and it's like I had to remember, like, you did your part, man. Like everything happens at the right time, at the right place, at the right moment. It's like you did your part.
Yeah.
Like you did your part.
And I think it's what.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Now you first.
No, I was just gonna make my point.
Well, yeah, and now I'm good with it. I mean, I still sound like a little sad, and I'm not trying to be like that little sad guy. Oh, poor me, right? I'm not one of those dudes. But like you do have to come to that realization, and I think it tears a lot of dudes up. But it's the same thing that those guys that didn't get into a fight feel. Like it's the same thing, and that's like what I try to tell them. It's like no, it's the same because we're taught. It goes like this idea of service. Like we're taught that like if the four of us ended up in a team together, I don't know Tyler from Adam until today, but like if we got put in a situation, well, we would do the thing we had to do, and that's the way it is, and like that's how we're taught and we're trained. So then when you take that from us, we're like, I don't I don't know what to do. Like what am I supposed to do with myself? Like I need that smart ass comment that someone's gonna bring me back to earth. I remember one time my buddy Sean, who is a granddad now. It's hilarious. Like both of his kids are Marines, and one of his Marines has been married for a year, and I just saw him holding his baby, Sean Enlow. He lives out in the Springs in Colorado, right? And I remember I was venting something about college students not knowing how to write something, and he's like, "Yeah, I guess look who forgot where they came from." And I was like, "Damn, dude, I needed that. Like, thank you." Like, but it was one of those things. Like, that's what we miss. Like it's the Aristotelian virtues. Like, we see the other ourselves in the other, and like that's the thing that the hyper real can't capture. That's the thing that the movies try to capture but don't. It isn't the movie stuff or the bumper sticker stuff. It's like I remember when Gunny Dill lost his foot. I remember looking at Timmy Ash and talking to Timmy, and Timmy was like, "Man, he's like, isn't this fucked up that I would rather that it was me?" And like, it's the most normal thing in the world, in our world. Like, it's like, yeah, dude, I totally. I'm like, that's not messed up. I know, like that was his platoon sergeant. Like he would have gladly traded his foot and his life so that his Gunny could have lived on with a whole foot, and if he'd have, like, right, like, and the same with any of our dead and any of our wounded folks. Like, oh man, at that moment I would have traded that for you, but like we didn't. And that's the thing that society hasn't figured out how to translate it. It's not We're not adrenaline junkies. We're not psychopaths who love all of the garbage. We just I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah.
No, it's just I think when you connect with it on that level, like I feel like a lot of us probably do. It just means that much more to you. Like you have that feeling just like I did. I got out in 2010. They went in back to Afghanistan in 2011, and I fucking sat here like you did, and watched that shit unfold. And I think it's just because of how much that it meant to you. You know what you were capable of, and what you could contribute if you were there, but you're not. And I don't think that ever leaves as long as that kind of shit keeps going on. But
Yeah.
some guys might not feel that way. They might be like, "Well, I'm fucking glad I'm out of that shit. Fuck that shit." But when it means that much to you, it's harder.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. Well, shit, man. What are you guys doing the rest of the day? 4:55. Oh, we've been 2 hours on the head almost.
Probably gonna
So,
make dinner. Well, I got dinner brewing. I got a corned beef brisket brewing. I'm gonna make some Reuben sandwiches. In fact, my wife just texted me. She's like, "Hey, are you guys almost done? It's close to dinner time.
Hurry up and finish."
Yeah.
Well, if you could tell everybody what are your plans next? I know you've been working on kind of like an essay book. Then you got all your work.
Yeah. I'd love to get that manuscript published. Once I get it in a shape that I think the publishing industry can handle and sell and get it out there, and just I don't know, continuing doing the thing, man. Like I don't have any big giant grand plans. I'm not gonna change the world and be like this politician or whatever. I'm just gonna go to work, and I get to go to work with the folks that I get to work with, and try to be the best leader that I can for them, and try to stay connected to our community, and hopefully help and get involved with vets and vet programs to enjoy the life that a lot of folks have paid for. Right? Like, I mean, that's one of the big things for me. It's like it somebody paid to, like, in a real way. Like, we understand, those of us that have been to war. Like, somebody paid for us to be able to have a beautiful day like this today. And it's weird too, right? Like, like my civilian folks that I know would be like, "Well, you paid for it too." I'm like, "Yeah, but not in quite the same way. Like, I'm still here. Like, I still have, whether it's the next 10 seconds or the next 10 years, like, I have more than somebody else. So, like, maybe just to just keep doing the best that I can for my family and other folks, and go from there." Which sounds corny, I know, but I don't know.
Oh, that don't sound corny, man. Sounds real. Sounds like you appreciate, you know, and it's weird too, because not everybody, like you say, in what you've been through, and I don't know all the details, have such a positive outlook on it like you do. And that's something that's important. It's important for all of us to try and figure that out, whatever that is. So um but don't not pay the tax, that mental tax on your writing, because it does help people,
Thank you.
and I appreciate talking to you, and uh, look forward to hearing or reading more of your stuff.
All right, man. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Thank
We'll
you.
see ya.
Have a
All
good
right,
day.
take it easy. You too.